just my nervous system letting me drop into my body where all that is was not possible, which I didn't know until I started dropping into my body to do this work. And then I realized why in my previous attempts in a variety of ways have not worked. And that's because it's been so at the level of the mind.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Daily Mushroom Podcast. Today on the show, we have Dr. Shannon Dames. And Shannon is a professor of nursing at Vancouver Island University. And out of the university, she runs an organization called Roots to Thrive, which is a ketamine-assisted group therapy workshop. And she teamed up recently with our friends over at TheraPsil to organize the first ever legal group psilocybin-assisted psychotherapy workshop in the history of North America. So there's 9 patients that got legal exemptions to help with their end-of-life anxiety through psilocybin therapy. Very cool stuff. So please enjoy this amazing conversation with Shannon Dames. All right, here we are. Shannon Dames. Thank you very much for joining us here today on the podcast.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so tell us about Shannon Dames, the human. I always find everyone that's doing this type of work has a very fascinating story about how they got into it, why it's so important to them, and that entire path. So let's just go back as far as you feel the need to, of where it kind of all began, and bring us up to where we're at now. That's probably a lot.
I'd say in terms of where it began, in terms of psychedelics in general, for maybe that feels like an easier bite to chew.
Yeah.
So I would say I'm in my 40s. Most of my life, I've had to grapple with some, I would say, PTSD. If I'm really honest, I could probably resonate with a few different diagnoses out there for a lot of years. Just a lot of my work experience, which has been in nursing, working in a lot of trauma-laden environments in the medical fields, teaching, etc., has been focused on really trying to understand human resiliency. And really what I've been trying to understand is myself and others that have had were incubated in early years in a pretty trauma-laden environment, and how, with all this self-help era that we're in, how we really cut through the noise and get to what really matters. And it's been a big question for my entire life. And I've had this really great pleasure in this, as I'm getting older, to have done a lot of kind of my clearing and personal work, so I can really enjoy this kind of bringing these kind of innovative ways forward. And these innovative ways have been very much how I've done a lot of my own personal work. So I'm just a lot of gratitude there for what these medicines have to offer. And also just a real honor to be in this space with so many others that have been working toward this place in our history for decades. Very much we are kind of standing on their shoulders as we get to bring it forward in a really exciting way. I could just keep going.
Yeah, keep going.
Okay.
Yeah. I like where you're going with this. Just everything that you've gone through in your own personal life, and how that brought you into this work. Maybe an interesting thing for our listeners to hear and understand was what other, when you talk about your own kind of personal mental health journey, what other therapies were you trying before you came to psychedelics?
Yeah, I would say lots of talk therapy. I think like a lot of others, I've been a big fan of, I don't even like the word psychotherapy just in terms of the first part of that word, but I've been a big fan of, the importance of having objective others in your life that can see things from a perspective that you can't. So there's been a lot of that. My challenge has always been that I've invested very heavily in my brain ever since I was a child. It was kind of my way out of a lot of dark, sticky situations has been thinking my way out of it in very survival based mode. So talk therapy in some ways was helpful for an objective perspective, but I have always been a successful gamer of that system to the point where, and I think you and I probably talked about this, but really resonating with that too. And it's getting into my body where the trauma resides really was almost impossible through talk therapy. It just, my nervous system letting me drop into my body where all that is was not possible, which I didn't know until I started dropping into my body to do this work. And then I realized why in my previous attempts in a variety of ways have not worked. And that's because it's been so at the level of the mind. The other, I've also been in and out of like 12-step type groups, so group type therapy. And I think I've...
And was that dealing with addiction?
Yeah. Honestly, like a pretty broad spectrum. Ever since I was a kid, I've been in Al-Anon groups and So and they've been a really big part of what has helped through the years, even starting as a kid. And it has also been a lot of the inspiration for the power of healing in relationship with others. It's really kind of helped me put some of those pieces together. At the same time, I would also say I'm even in group type environments with my particular rigid ego system and hypervigilant brain, it has still been really, really challenging. And I think this is where psychedelics kind of came in, helping me understand how we can actually work around the brain, especially for those that, essentially get cut off at the neck anytime their window of vulnerability gets threatened, which I can really relate to. So it's been a huge asset for me and my ability to expand that kind of window of tolerance so that I can sit in my body and really do the healing work from that kind of more, internal intelligence that resides there, rather than just trying to like hit it with the figuring it out mind.
Figuring it out. Yeah. That's something we love to do. We love to try and intellectually deconstruct things and put them back together. But it doesn't, there's something else that goes on with psychedelics. When you say kind of getting past the neck and into the body, I feel that too. When I get really worked up or overwhelmed, I'm all up here. It's almost like it's like a numbness throughout my body and I'm just working it out and spiraling. So, I think the talk therapy and everything, all this other work, Al-Anon, I've talked to a lot of people and it does serve a part. It kind of gets you to that place where you're like, okay, I know exactly what's going on. Now I got to get into my body. And that's the whole unlock from what I've seen and talked and experienced myself.
Yeah. And I think there's this piece around, so in our culture in the West, and I'll speak for myself, and I think it can apply to a lot of others, is it's this individualist frame that we have where we're like, we're on our own, we're like scrappers in society trying to compete with one another, climb the ladders, make a name for ourselves. And it's very achievement driven, earning our value and worth in the world. And I think it's really impacted our ability to heal, because to heal in relationship, which I think is the only way we can really sustain healing, from my experience, it requires us to lay down some of that individualism and to trust in a collective to see us, to show up as we are and to see us. And to hold us when we need to be held, which many of us do not have an experience of in our childhood, right? And for many of us is a lot of the reason we have a lot of insecurities below the neck, is because of the lack of that kind of holding, metaphorically and otherwise. So I think that's been a big piece too with working with psychedelics on the historical end. Even we in this individualist society, we look at psychedelics like a drug that we then take for our individual purposes and consume, and not recognizing that these medicines traditionally would not be used in these individualistic ways, including some of our one-to-one, therapy models and whatnot. And I think that's been one of my big learnings, is that I don't know if it's going to serve us to just take the medicines and plant them in our individualistic healing framework, and not recognize that the actual set and setting these medicines are used in, are in a safe community, collective, relationally focused process. So anyway, I'll leave it there.
No, I think that's an amazing point to make. And one of my big hopes with this psychedelic renaissance that's going on right now is that it opens us all up to living in community a little bit more, and reconnecting to that and disconnecting from these individual lifestyles that a lot of people are living. So, that's, you just feel it, right? Like when you're around people and you're around really good people that you truly like, you feel authentic with, and you feel like you can be yourself and they can be themselves to you. You're just like, this is it. Like you get those like good feelings where you're like, this is what it's all about.
Yeah. Well,
and it's an amazing, powerful feeling.
And I think when you say like the feeling is like a literal vibration it is a security, and like a deep felt sense of security. And from that sense of security, like everything changes, the world looks more navigable. We feel a sense of belonging. And I think that's something that I've been really learning, this is what's been healing me, is it is not the psychedelic medicines. It is, they are a facilitator, but it really is that deep sense of security that these psychedelics can amplify when it draws us more into connection.
Yeah, they're the wisdom and the guide to bring us to the like what we really need for ourselves in our day-to-day life, right?
And I think like even the World Health Organization, this topic like gets me going. I feel like I'm just cutting you off.
Yeah. No, go. This is what it's all about.
Yeah, it's I think, and a lot of this is helpful because this is a lot of allowing the aha moments and the balls to drop for me too. The World Health Organization like has been saying for years that like our problem as a human race is disconnection. Right. And that at the very core of a lot of our mental health challenges and this crisis that we're in, the vast majority of it is based in disconnection, including the ramifications of trauma and poverty that can come from that as well.
Right. And and I'm assuming that you believe that the process starts with reconnecting to ourselves, right? Because like you reconnect to yourself, to your body, and then you're open to being vulnerable with others. Is that kind of a little bit of the theory how it works?
There's a bit of a chicken and an egg thing that happens, because if and even kind of going back to some of the research and the theorists that have come before us, that even we tend to have our foundations in our psychology and psychiatry, is like with Carl Rogers' work around unconditional positive regard. Like we as humans require a felt sense of unconditional positive regard, like that frequency like within our bodies, and we gain that in our childhood primarily. The problem is that most people in the West here, I'll just say many people, don't actually experience that feeling in their childhood. So we go on to our adulthood as kind of more insecure beings. So with that sense, it's how we learn that frequency. It's like an attunement. Like it would be like a parent attuning their child with that frequency. You are loved as you are worthy, you are valuable, you are delightful just by being you. Like those inner feelings and belief systems are what get us there, right? So, we learn it from our parents, ideally. And then once that frequency is in us, we can teach it to others. We can provide unconditional positive regard, and then they can receive that feeling. The thing is it doesn't matter if you've even though as a kid we may have been given it, it's not enough. We have to actually take it in. And the only way we can take it in is if we believe it. And the only way we can believe it is if we show up, we test it. We test the relationships that we're in. And in order to do that, we have to show up like authentically and honestly with each other. So it's in a culture that teaches us not to show up, to cloak and hide. There's a lost opportunity for many of us as we get conditioned, colonized into these kind of displaying type beings rather than our authentic self. We often don't receive that frequency, that we are unconditionally positively regarded, because we are displaying. We're not showing up. We're not testing the containers. So all of that to say, I think it's both, because we can't actually feel the feeling when we drop in our body if we've never received the frequency. Right. So it's a kind of a learning and a sharing.
Right. So now we're getting into your work here with Roots to Thrive, right? You're talking about that authenticity and openness and Roots to Thrive. Could you tell us a little bit about the organization there and how it works with the ketamine-assisted? I was going to say psychotherapy, but I know you don't like that word. Psych therapy.
Yeah.
We'll take the psycho out. Yeah. Psych therapy.
Thank you. Yeah, and it's a fine word. It's just,
I know.
I got to get over it.
It's got some negative connotations, right?
It does.
Mainly
we should
that
all
one
just,
movie that was made way back.
needs to be, like, we all have a psyche. So Roots to Thrive is essentially, we had to put a name on it so somebody could refer to what the heck we're doing. It's really not owned by anybody. It is a program that has been collaboratively developed by different human beings over the last 6 years that have leaned into this. It's all 90% volunteer work with a variety of, including a variety of disciplines in the healthcare field, Indigenous elders, experts from and the idea was, it started back in 2015 and 16, where we were working with nurses and recognizing that there is a lot of how we train our, like, trauma-informed practice, our resiliency, or a lot of our self-help stuff, especially in the medical field, it's just more information. It's more like sitting in a seat, taking in all the to-do items and what we should be doing, and memorizing the research. But it's just investing in more of the kind of neurotic living up at the level of the mind, garnering more information, but not actually getting into our bodies and being able to do the healing work at an embodied level. So it started with this idea of, like, could we do something different? Is there something out there that would help us get more vulnerable? Kind of this, a bit like polyvagal, or the polyvagal theory, where we collectively co-regulate, expand our windows of tolerance. We start showing up, like practicing what it looks like to be honest with each other, work through conflict, like all of these things that are required to live in authentic communities. And so we started kind of playing with the framework, essentially, and we ran it, got a bunch of feedback, ran it again, got a bunch of feedback, went through research, got some, so just trying to build with the idea that, we're not trying to commercialize anything or make a quick buck. This is purely like, how do we raise consciousness and help relearn ourselves, like, as all of us doing this are actually in a healing process ourselves with each other, right? So we're patient partners ourselves, trying to learn how us settler folks learn how to live in community again, much like Indigenous, I hate to say our Indigenous friends because they're not really ours, but those that have kind of come alongside of us and helped us develop this know a lot more deeply in their bones. I don't know if that's the right way to say it, but so really kind of learning how to travel together with this reconciliation type framework. I think in a nutshell, that's what I would say Roots is. It's a collaborative of people trying to remember what it means to be human and what it means to heal in relationship, so that we can feel more secure and inspired in the world, and that we can then, go forth and contribute to that same feeling in others.
And the group therapy is just such a huge part of it, right? Like that's.
Yeah, and even the group therapy word, it's so what.
Well, like the community aspect. Let's reframe.
Well,
that.
and I appreciate that, because I get people say that, like, what is a community of practice? What do people don't even know what that is? Just say group therapy. The thing is that makes it a little bit different is, so there's a community of practice, in what this looks like in Roots is we have like 6 to 9 people in a group. 2 of those people are facilitators, and it's a very structured container, and the structure is very important. It's ceremonial in a way, and ceremony as in a sharing of relationship and some like shared agreements and intentions within the group. So it takes the social anxiety down. It's very predictable. There's a certain level of trust and buy-in that the whole group has agreed to before initially, right when we come together, those agreements are in place. And then with that, even the facilitators. So there's no hierarchy within the circle. So the facilitators, patients, whatever we want to call ourselves, we're all equal. Facilitators hold the structure only. But we all show up vulnerably at the level of our humanity. We all take off our hats. No one gets to, wear our big system hats or the letters behind our name. It's all scrubbed off, and we just show up as humans in a circle. And in that circle, the goal is that we stay in our bodies as we're together as best we can, which is really hard when we've learned to not do that. So it's a learning. It's a community of practice. We're literally practicing. Yep. And we practice honesty, not holding back emotions. So there's like a deep sharing that happens that is led into the circle. And there is a practice of like, how does this look if we're not cloaking and displaying and lying, which we learn to do quite, saying yes when we mean no, et cetera, et cetera. So what happens if we practice another way in a spirit of unconditional positive regard? Wow. And it's a testing of the container that I talked about earlier, right? So it's a constant testing so that we can receive unconditional positive regard at the deepest level. And from there, that is where the healing begins to happen.
Right. I would think that in the first little bit of working with a new group of people, it would probably get pretty gnarly, everyone being hyper honest and blunt with each other. Is that accurate? I mean, it's part of the process, right? To kind of really bear it all with someone. But I've done a little bit of group therapy, not with psychedelics, but people getting triggered and kind of tensions rise, and that's part of the point. So is that something that you see within Roots to Thrive?
Yeah, good question, and I really appreciate, because it probably does sound like that. The other piece of this is we really ask people in the spirit of self-compassion, which is also part of this building process, is really learning how to nurture ourselves in the process. So, and we often in this culture, the faster we get there, the better. But what happens is when we push ourselves in that window of tolerance where we're just like, remove the entire display, say things that create too much vulnerability too quick, it just causes our bodies to totally contract, right? So then, and then, so it's this like, so what we actually ask people right from the beginning is just like to just stay on the like edge of their window of tolerance and maybe stretch like 1% to 3% each time. Yeah. Not too much, not too little. So it doesn't mean like all of a sudden we just metaphorically disrobe in front of each other, because that actually does not work. It's just it just sends people running, it's just way too much. So it's a slow unfolding, working with our bodies around how much it can tolerate, and that practice is really about like the self-compassion and working with the body and at the pace of the body's trust.
Right. Yeah, just peeling off those layers very slowly.
Yeah.
And taking your time and being gentle with yourself, right? To know that if you're in one of those first sessions and you do feel triggered, it's like maybe give it a second and just let it pass and respond accordingly.
Totally. And people to even not share or turn their cameras off. A lot of it's on Zoom. So it's really about cultivating that agency with people to like, you get to call the shots here. This isn't like this is about you taking back your agency And you get to practice that in this group. So if that means you need to bow out for a second, then bow out. That's part of it.
Right. Yeah, that's good. That's good. So there's we'll get to the ketamine part in a second here of how that integrates into this this practice and therapy. But I wanted to hit on a few of the points that you have here around congruence, coherence, and then you already mentioned polyvagal theory a little bit. And then the theory of unmet needs. Those seem like those are kind of 4 pillars of the practices. Would that be correct to say that?
Yeah. It's kind of how we describe how this works, so people can understand it. And part of this, a lot of the reason it's important for us to have the research and the theories behind it is, especially in the West, in our figuring it out brains, there is no way we're going to go into these noisy bodies unless there's a really good reason to go there. So it's a bit of a like convincing process of like, it's a little bit hard. It's not going to feel good down there. There's going to be some times it's really, really hard. and it's worth it because, you know, the research shows if you can invest in this kind of vulnerability and relationships, it can go really good places. So on that note, it's the 2 main pillars. The 2 main theorists are Aaron Antonovsky and sense of coherence, which really is about our orientation to the world, those people around us, events in the world, how we navigate stimuli and whether it's stressful or not. That's all sense of coherence. And it came out of research that was done with Holocaust survivors, starting way back in the 70s. And then it's been researched, well vetted for decades, really looking at how it impacts our sense of coherence, has a significant impact on our mental and physical health outcomes over our lifetime. So and that's one piece. And then the other piece is our orientation to ourselves, which is Carl Rogers and congruence. And that's how safe and secure we feel to show up in the world. And most of us, particularly in these developed countries, do not generally feel safe to show up as we are. Our self-consciousness levels are very, very high, to a point where we tend to be quite incongruent, meaning what's our values, passions, wants, desires, we often lose sight of them and we do what we should do. We look how we should look, we dress how we should dress. And the further apart those are, the real and the ideal, the more shame we carry with us. So highly incongruent cultures, the developed worlds, those, you know, a lot of the colonized world, all of that, we tend to carry a lot of shame. Right. And with that, we also tend to spill a lot of shame. So we're also cultures that tend to shame each other without any kind of maliciousness or consciousness. We wield shame like a weapon. And it's how we control each other. It's how we assimilate each other. Whereas in cultures that are more congruent, they celebrate each other's colors. When people rise, there's joy rather than like threat, you know?
Tearing them back down. They want bring them back down to my level. I don't want you to get ahead of me. Kind of thing, right?
How many of us are conditioned in these systems to live, right? So, and then the unmet needs series, there's lots of controversy with Maslow. It's linear and doesn't always apply culturally in a nice package. However, the theory of unmet needs is Maslow's hierarchy really is just recognizing that as humans, and in common humanity, we do have basic requirements to thrive. And love and belonging and security and self-esteem and basic physical safety and security elements are all very much important to us. And if any of them are missing or threatened, we experience stress. So just recognizing that stress is really about the threat of our basic human needs, or the perceived threat, not even necessarily the actual threat.
Right. So if our perception of our basic needs is off and is not in line with an authentic, real version of ourselves, that's going to cause all kinds of problems.
Totally.
And there's a lot of money in feeling insecure and feeling like we don't have what we should have or we should be different, right? Like there's always something to sell someone. when they don't think they have it all.
Oh, and it's this self-help era that we're in is like it's quite the thing, right? Because there's so many great things about it because we have more access to resources than I think we ever have. But there's also this constant not good enough thing about it too, where it's like, oh, you got to go to this course, you got to go to this training, you got to do this thing, and then you'll be, it's this constant reaching for,
Right.
because we don't feel good enough in here. So we're constantly grasping on the surface to compensate for not feeling good enough here.
Yeah. At some point, you got to just take what you've learned and go live, right? Go implement. You can always go back to more help or therapy or group work, but the integration and the implementation is everything to just really just, I don't know, be.
Yeah, well, and that's it.
And live.
It's the be,
Yeah.
not the do. And I think we get that backwards, right? Like, and we're so afraid to be in these noisy bodies that doing feels like a way better option.
Do you think that there's like a reason of why human beings are piling on more and more distractions? Like, are we doing this out of a sense of need to just constantly be distracted because it is so hard to live in the noise?
Yeah, well, and I think I go back to that, like World Health Organization has been telling us for years, like we are a disconnected civilization at this point, and that sense of disconnection within us creates uncomfortable feelings, noise, insecurity that we aren't comfortable being with. So beneath the surface of life, it's too scary to be and not have a whole bunch of doing distractions that make us, and hold on to those things for security. Because if we let go and we're alone with ourselves in a disconnected feeling state, I mean, it doesn't get much worse.
Right.
Yeah,
and it's such an interesting conversation in like the 2021 here, and we've all started working remotely, and a lot of us are working from home by ourselves. Like I had a day today, I worked from home today, and it's a strange thing to really dig into of like, do I feel alone today? Because I probably talked to 25 different people, whether that was phone calls, emails, Instagram messages. Like there's a million ways for me to connect with people, but is that are we really connecting as human beings when we're just talking through our devices? Are our brains really are our bodies, not our brains, are our bodies like able to feel this connection through these yet? Maybe one day we're going to fully integrate, and that's a whole other podcast and conversation, but we're in a very interesting time of shocking our systems and our bodies, right?
Yeah. And I do, it's when COVID started, gosh, it's been almost 2 years now. And we went and did the Roots to Thrive thing totally online, and we're like, I don't know if this is going to work. And, it does work. Yeah. And even when you and I met recently, and like you were sharing some things with me, and I was like having goosebumps, and like I was with you.
True.
And there's so I think it's sometimes like less about the platform and more about our felt safety to like really show up with each other.
Yeah, it's what we're actually saying to each other. And you just kind of made me think of maybe some childhood memories of Christmas family get-togethers, and being like, there was like 18 people in that room, but it did not feel connected. There was tension in the air, and like like you and I have only met twice now through Zoom calls here, but that both of our conversations, I feel very connected with you. So it's like the quality of the conversation, the connection, not necessarily the medium.
Yeah, and it's really interesting. So with this is kind of another example of how, like, with Roots, we have this for 12 weeks. People travel together, so they get to know each other really, really well. Yeah. And then in the integration sessions, we actually mix the groups up. So we have people integrating in an entirely different small group with people they haven't even met yet. And because the whole cohort has the same intentions of showing up, unconditional positive regard, they're moving in a very similar, there's like this common thread that's holding everybody together. The feedback we get are like, I'm with complete strangers and I feel like I've known these people for years, right? They're like compassionately witnessing each other and they've never even met. And it just really kind of goes to show like the felt sense of community is really powerful, you know?
Yeah. Vulnerability is massive, right? Like when you really show up in front of someone, you feel it like in your chest, it like hits you, it makes you well up, and you're just like, what was that? So yeah, that's, I resonate with that completely. Okay. This is something really cool that I want to talk about now, happening in real time. We didn't talk about ketamine. We can come back to that in a little bit. I have a few questions about ketamine and how that integrates with Root to Thrive. But just recently, Roots to Thrive teamed up with TheraPsil. We've had many people on the podcast from TheraPsil to help facilitate 9 end-of-life patients getting their Section 56 exemptions, which for anybody that's not familiar with that gives them the legal ability to do psilocybin therapy. And that's happening right now. And that's like in the works. So tell us what's happening there. And it sounded like there was a couple things here. It is no cost to any of the patients, which is incredible that these people get to do this for completely for free. And I did read in an article that the last Section 56 exemption came 3 hours prior to the first session beginning.
Yeah.
So tell us about this crazy experience and what's going on here. Also, like, this is a first in North America of like 9 people like group psilocybin therapy. So congratulations for making it happen. And I'm blown away.
Yeah, thank you. It's so much of this has just been a series of open doors and a lot of volunteer hands that have made a lot of this happen. And the reason it has been no cost is because it's been built by volunteers and run by volunteers. So I just really want to lift up that crew. So this was it is a bit of a spin-off from the Roots to Thrive because it is a collaborative of individuals, and whatever vessel we're working in, it's not so much about the vessel. So Vancouver Island University runs the RTT Roots to Thrive and ketamine-assisted therapy program right now. And then this, the Roots to Thrive kind of psilocybin part has been picked up by a non-profit called My Community Journeys. My Community Thrives, goes by both. And that nonprofit has been working with TheraPsil on and Health Canada exemptions. And it has been such a joy to be able to kind of take our learnings and what we've been working with for the last year and a half with ketamine and transition that into a container working with psilocybin. And to watch the very kind of similar transformative effects of doing this work in community rather than just as individuals, kind of doing this on their own. So and it's a lot of it has been this first one was a 6-week program. It looks like we're expanding to 8 just to provide even more of kind of the community practice environment. Participants meet for a number of weeks leading up to an in-group consumption, a group sit where essentially you sit in a circle and people partake together. It's about an 8-hour day. And then there's facilitators that kind of work the room, and that's including kind of clinicians, like traditional clinicians as in physicians and nurses, and then also working with somatic energy healers as well that have been doing this work and kind of on more of the bringing in the additional cultural pieces to honor other ways of being and knowing. And the combination of this has just been like such a pleasure to learn and grow from. And quite a bit different than our biomedical system, right? So it's been kind of fun to see how we can like interweave these different cultural ways of being and knowing, and include the kind of biomedical requirements in the process as well. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, it's amazing that it's happening, and I love that it went from just a jump to like a group therapy session of 9 people, because there's been a lot of people kind of getting their one-on-one therapies, and then it's just like 9 people all together and bringing over all of that research. So in the like, what are the big takeaways so far of like what's been happening and the results that people have been getting from the group therapy?
Yeah, and I'll conflate the two programs a little bit with the ketamine and the psilocybin, because I'm not sure they're quite different in terms of the populations that we're working with. I mean, we're all as working with humans in their entirety, and just based on this individualistic society that we live in, where we silo people and the hats that the labels that they have to wear. So in the psilocybin work, the label that they have to wear is somebody who has an end of life condition. So that those are the people that get the exemptions right now. And then with the ketamine work, the door is quite a bit wider. We can work with treatment-resistant mental health conditions, which can include end-of-life distress as well.
Right.
And we are, in terms of impact, there's a focus on the medicine because it is a huge carrot, and it is definitely the part that people are the most interested in because it stands out. It's pretty shiny. However, most people, after they've gone through the program, and the psilocybin, this is only one cohort that we're in right now, so I won't generalize too heavily on that one, but with the ketamine work, by and large, participants, once they finish, are like, it was the community that's healing me. It's the community that's healing me.
Yeah, I love that.
And the medicine is what helps get the hypervigilant nervous systems, which is nobody's fault, which is part of the consequence of living in a fairly toxic colonized culture. The psychedelics really help get beyond the nervous system so that people can move into their bodies. And once they move into their bodies and they get access to their heart space, and they start feeling connected to each other, to nature, to the creator, to connected to all things, it starts to create a security in our body that we did not have before. Because all of a sudden we realize, my God, I'm not alone. I have these people. I'm in this collective nest of people that see me and celebrate me. And that sinks even deeper into our beings than it would if we were in, our more natural conscious state where we're quite guarded, right? So it's much harder to get that sense of security to unfold.
Yeah. Even just the ability to be like, I can feel. And this is something I've battled with that I didn't understand on a deeper level until I started doing some psilocybin therapy sessions myself. But it's like, whoa, I didn't know I could feel like this coming in both directions with another person or with a group of people. And that's a very profound thing to experience when you're like, I thought I was able to feel certain things. But then there's just this whole new knowledge of information and sensation that starts to come through that has made me personally feel like everything's okay.
Yeah.
And we're going to be okay. And we're getting there. And it's just like a sense that like, it's all unfolding. Stress kind of melted away a little bit. So
yeah. And
that's a big one.
And it is this, like, there's this, in the psychotherapy realm, we have like a story and a solution attached to every little neurotic niggle, right? And in the psychedelic world, it's like we don't have to have a story attached to every sensation that comes up. And sometimes the body's just doing its thing, and it doesn't need to have a narrative attached to what it's doing, right? It's releasing energy, it's crying, it's shaken, it's whatever, it's doing whatever it does. And sometimes like it's just a surrendering to, okay, body, you do your thing, I'm gonna hold you while you're doing it, and these people are gonna hold you while you're doing it too. And it is this kind of trusting that like actually healing, we don't have to even know, we don't have to name it. It can actually just happen on its own. We can literally just shed these stuck energies that have been creating all sorts of neuroses just by sitting in our body and letting our body do what it needs to do to heal the wounds that it just never had a chance to feel and heal. It's pretty amazing.
Talking about goosebumps here. Yeah, I'm getting that. I'm recently feeling that from my own experience. So I understand now. It's cool to talk to people and hear this and be like, I get it. You know, I don't need to figure out how to heal. I don't need to like think my way through healing. And I've tried that a lot in my life, and it got me to a place that made me feel better, but there's always still something there. So
it's never enough.
Yeah, you got to feel it. You got to let it wash over you. I think it just let it hit you like a bus and run over you a couple times. That's what it can kind of feel like, but in a good way.
Yeah. It's nice if you can limit the amount of times you have to be run over in order to like bring the insights in.
That's true. Limit the damage. So with psilocybin and ketamine, the reason why Vancouver Island University and Roots to Thrive is focusing on ketamine is around the legalities mostly, right? Because a lot of psychedelic medicines, as we've talked about, just help us get out of the head into the body so we can really heal, if we were going to boil it down. But what are the big differences in the therapies there? And do you see one being more powerful than the other?
If you would have asked me that about a year and a half ago, I would have said the only reason we're doing ketamine is because it's low-hanging fruit and the system can kind of understand it. Psilocybin is just like, that's going to be a ways out before the system can even get their head around the healing mechanisms of this thing. So now I don't feel that way at all. I actually think ketamine is fantastic. The amount of people that we've now brought through, we've done hundreds of sessions at this point, and it is the potential transformation of that medicine is enormous, and it is quite controlled. It's got a short action window. I think it's because we are combining it with community. We are not putting people in sterile white hospital rooms, putting a chemical in their body and hoping they feel more secure on the other side of it. That generally, I don't think is sustainable. But when people are working with the ketamine at psychedelic dosing ranges, and that's a key point as well, and they are being held in a secure set and setting with people they feel relationally, unconditionally, positively regarded by, and I mean feel it, believe it. What can come from that is nothing short of a miracle, and if you look at a lot of our mental health challenges, many of them come from the same problem, right? That we are generally feeling disconnected, not good enough, not worthy. And then we double down on the got to figure it out neurotic part, right? So we get these hypervigilant brains that are in survival mode, just trying to be loved and accepted in the world and doing everything possible to do it. So once people start feeling loved and accepted without all that, it's like we start to shed stuff, right? Rather than clinging for security on the surface and getting all addicted to all sorts of things, we start clinging within, right? Or clinging in relationship and learning how to receive unconditional positive regard, and then hopefully not clinging so much at all, but it's kind of a loosening of the grip because there's a general sense of security and confidence in the world.
Right. Wow. And the history on ketamine is interesting. It's been used in hospitals for a very long time to sedate people that are going into shock, right? Like if someone is having a traumatic experience with a physical injury. And so do you know when ketamine crossed over into, this is a psychedelic that can be used for psychotherapy? When did that happen?
Well, ketamine-assisted psychotherapy or ketamine therapy has been going on for years now, especially if we look in the United States. I mean, it is a very progressive practice. I think, not necessarily ketamine-assisted therapy or even ketamine-assisted psychotherapy, but actually using it to treat depression through infusions is not new. It's considered one of the most important discoveries in the last 50 years in depression. So it is very much, I think, at the top of the list in terms of not just the psychedelic effect and how we reorient to ourselves, but also in the biological effect. There's some really important components that are showing that people can actually sit in a room and get an infusion and not have any setting or integration, and see some pretty immediate results just purely
Right.
from the pathological biological mechanisms. So, and then when you add in the the therapy components where we're really working with bodies and reorienting, and I think it's extra powerful, and the durability of the results is, I think, far greater.
Right.
But the research, we're in a program of research right now, and we've not been going long enough to test the long-term durability. So I think the jury's still out on that until the research comes. But based on what we're seeing, we do feel like this is sustaining people in terms of the community aspect.
Right. So one thing I've experienced with other group therapy, some group therapy stuff that I've done is you're in your group and you get in and everybody's feeling the same thing. Maybe you're starting to speak the same language. You're connecting on a deeper level, and then you have to go back to your life, right? And maybe you're feeling a different connection with your partner or your mother or your father, brother, whoever, and there can be that challenging step of like, how do I now communicate with this person that hasn't done this work? Do you see any of that, or can you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah. So we do ask that people don't make any major life relationship decisions while they're in this kind of liminal mix, and that it's because it is this, like, the liminal space is this space where you've kind of like, you're stepping away from what was, which can be like unhelpful belief systems and habits, but you're not quite like fully attached to this new way of being that you're looking toward, and it's a floating space, and it often manifests as looking like a toddler in many ways in life, right? Like trying to learn how to use your voice and be honest, and it's coming out like, I don't like you. Whatever. Right. Like tantrums on the surface, basically.
Yeah.
Which is normal, right? And we're like, this is normal.
Yeah.
You're probably going to behave like a toddler in a few different ways because you're not skillful yet. You gain skillfulness through practice. You have to expect that you will likely offend people here and there and be irritating here and there. And those that are around you, it is irritating, right? Like, and especially when somebody's like moving their puzzle piece, it's not like they're asking permission to move their puzzle piece, and their moving their puzzle piece is requiring you to move yours just because. So it's irritating because there's kind of this sense of like, what's you're doing? Why is it my consequence now? Like, why do I have to put up with you, right? So.
And we're creatures of habit too, right?
Totally.
When someone comes in and starts like mixing up our world, we're like, whoa, hey.
Yeah, exactly. Unless
don't
we're
bring
like,
me into your shit.
Yeah, unless we're leading the change.
Right.
We generally don't like change, right? It's like something put upon us, like an oppression of sorts, right? So.
True.
So I think it's just the normalizing of this, right? So when things start getting volatile, which is volatility is part of the process, right? Like there's got to be grace for that there's some space around it to be like, okay, it's not personal, because it isn't actually personal. Usually the projections coming forward are, that person's, but so it's more of a trying to prepare families and support systems for how to engage in the process and try not to take it so personally with the volatility.
So you do actually involve people's families that are like, is that a communication that the Roots to Thrive practitioners, they communicate directly with the families, or are you just instructing your, for lack of a better word, your patients or participants on how to communicate?
Yeah, it's a good question. So through our learning, because this whole program, we've been asking people, what would make this better? What do we need to remove? What do we need to add? So we've loud and clear have been asked to provide support for friends and family. So we actually have a night, like an info night, where friends and family come and ask questions of the team. We have participants come and share their experience so that there is kind of this communication. We also send out like a video for family members right in the very beginning, just to say like, hey, there's likely going to be some challenges. This is normal, and this is how you can support. And if it's really irritating, that's normal too. And
right. Yeah. It's like we've turned your loved one into a bit of a fractal here, and we're going to help them put themselves back together, but it's going to be a rocky road and it could be a little messy.
Oh, totally. Well, and when we've been dishonest for a lot of years and we're in close relationships and all of a sudden we're finding our voice and all of these resentments are starting to come out, it's like, watch out, right? But there's clearing that comes with it, right? Like it's part of the process of learning how to re-engage in healthier ways.
Yeah, otherwise that just, you talk about the tension in the body, right? Like those are what I see as the two options, is like go through the messy process of having those awkward encounters with loved ones and, you know, work colleagues while you're working stuff out and getting it out and clearing it, or just have it be this tension that lives in your gut or your hip or your shoulder for the rest of your life. And
totally,
who knows where that ends up, right? There's a lot of stuff coming out with carrying stress and trauma and links to autoimmune disorders, other various diseases and cancer. And so it's a choice we all have to make, right?
Yeah. Well, and it leads to hostile cultures, which many of us live in, right? We're like, we have all this resentment and shame built up in our bodies, and it just flows all over the surface, which is just not helpful for any of us.
I don't think so. Well, this has been an amazing conversation, Dr. Shannon. It's been so great having you on here, and everything that you're doing is so amazing and inspiring, and I can just see, and from everything that you're doing, it really comes from a place of true love and authenticity. And so thank you for doing that. Is there anything else you want to tell us about things coming up, how people can get involved? I'm going to link to the website and everything for Roots to Thrive and direct people there. But yeah, what else do you got for us?
I don't know. I feel like we covered a lot.
Yeah,
maybe we can leave it there.
We sure did. Okay, awesome, great. Well, yeah, so we'll share a lot about what you guys are up to. We'll have plenty of articles in our newsletters coming up to keep track. I can't wait to see the results in December from the My Community Thrives, the end of life patients there in their group setting. That's incredible stuff. So thank you again for being here, and we will talk soon.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Well, that's it for this week's episode, everyone. Thanks for joining us. I really appreciate all you guys being here on this educational journey with us all. If you want to continue your education around the art, science, and business of psychedelics, I highly recommend you sign up for our newsletter. Just go over to dailymushroom.co, pop in your email, and every Friday you'll get a newsletter straight to your inbox that keeps you up to date on everything happening in the world of psychedelics. You can also follow us on Instagram at dailymushroom.co and TikTok at dailymushroom.co. Thanks again, everyone, and we'll see you on the other side.